shop life. Alright.
Welcome. This is our first episode of Shop Talk with Bob, and we're going to be exploring all sorts of techniques and procedures and tools and materials that go into making handmade knives. The series is going to be quite extensive, and each episode is what we're going to call a deep dive. We're going to do some close-up examination of various procedures and tools, and we're going to start off this first one with taps and tapping. And that's not the dance, because I left my tap shoes at the cobbler. He's putting new soles on them. So we're going to talk about the process of making screw threads in holes. That's the basic explanation of tapping. So we're going to start off with some nomenclature, which can get pretty complicated, and going to be dealing with some numbers. So you might want to get a pad and pencil to take some notes, which I've done here. I've got my notes so I don't screw things up too badly. And we're going to begin with the various types of taps. And there are two types, and I'm going to show them on here. Here we go. We've got two types of taps. The top one is known as a standard or cutting tap. And you can see it's got a flute or a groove that runs the length of the tap. And that groove, usually there's two or three, form cutting edges on the teeth of the screw threads. That actually cuts as it goes through the hole. So it removes material and little chips fall out. The second type is known as a roll tap or a forming tap. You notice this does not have any flutes, doesn't have any cutting edges. What this does is compresses the material and actually forces it into the shape of a screw thread. So this is the two types of thread of the taps that we've got, cutting and forming. I prefer the forming taps for the smaller taps that I use, the 172, 256, also the odd 80. The next thing we're going to look at is the types of taps. Now there are three general types of taps: the taper, the plug, and the bottoming. Now, how do we tell the difference? Well, if you look at the tip, you'll see that the taper tap has the first couple of threads ground off, so that as it begins the cut, it has to remove a very small amount of material. Makes it a lot easier, and it gradually, as it moves up the tap, takes off more and more material. The plug tap also has some threads removed, ground down, but not as many. So you can make a deep hole with the screw going all the way almost to the bottom, not quite. The screw will not go past this point because the threads haven't been completely cut. Now that's where the bottoming tap comes in. The bottoming tap has its threads all the way to the bottom, as it says, so that the screw can go all the way down into whatever material you're actually tapping. So, those are the types of taps. So we have the taper, the plug, and the bottoming tap as the three shapes. Okay. Now I want to move on to the screws and the sizes of taps. How do we measure a tap? How do we know what size we're looking for? Taps in the English system, which is what we use, inches, feet, yards, use two numbers. The first number, a half, this is an example, half 20. That's a half 20 tap. The half refers to the diameter of the screw, therefore the full diameter of the tap. That's a half inch. The 20 refers to the number of threads per inch. Diameter, threads per inch. So 1/2 20 is a half inch in diameter, 20 threads per inch. And a 172 would be a number one. Don't ask me what that means because nobody really knows. That's been lost to history. That's a type of wire size that has been used for a long time. 256, you've got number 2 wire with 56 threads, etc. So I mentioned that we're working in the English system, which is inches, feet, yards. There's also the metric system, and they have a completely different way of measuring their taps. I'm not going to go into that because I don't use that very much, but I did want to make a little comment on the side. There's a book that I found very interesting called The Measure of All Things by Ken Alder. And it was the story of the two French surveyors who determined the length of the meter by surveying France and Spain right about the time of the French Revolution. And they determined what the length of the meter is based on 1/10,000,000th of the distance between the North Pole and the equator. And they were really, really close, even 250 years ago. Anyway, it's an interesting book. I really enjoyed it. I think you will too.